Welcome to the Jerusalem Dispatch podcast, broadcast from the studios of the Jerusalem Post. I'm Elliot Jager.
And I'm Calev Ben David. Our accents, as usual, may be of two Jews out of New York City, but our vantage point is that of longtime residents of Jerusalem looking out from here at the latest developments in Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world. Now, my co-host is Elliot Jager. He's a political scientist and the former journalist here at the Jerusalem Post. His latest book is Jewish Civilization and Its Discontents, a post-October 7th primer and polemic.
Go out and buy it. And with me is veteran journalist Calev Ben David, formerly senior editor anchor at the I-24 News channel and former managing editor here at the Jerusalem Post.
Correct. Among many other things.
Listen, Calev, we're back again. How is your week?
Well, Elliot, my week here in Israel, I think like most people in the country, was definitely focused on one particular day, Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. I can remember my first year living in Israel in 1986 when I was in the middle of town and the sirens rang out.
Right.
And there on King George Street, on traffic, the morning traffic just froze in the street. Everybody in the street froze. I had never seen anything like it. Growing up in the U.S., there's nothing like that. The siren rings out and everybody just freezes in place. It made such an impact on me. And of course, same as this year, I did on Erev Yom HaShoah, the evening of Holocaust Remembrance Day, my wife and I went to a special remembrance ceremony at the Shalom Hartman Institute. It's a noted a think tank and sort of research institute here in Jerusalem.
Here in Jerusalem, right.
Right, and they had a special program. They brought together a few different kihilot, those members of different sort of synagogues or congregations here in Jerusalem, spanning Orthodox to Reform, I should note.
Right.
To have a special program. And this was very moving because some of the speakers who spoke there had some personal connections to the October 7th attack, relatives who are victims of the attack or still being held hostage. In one case, someone from kibbutz near Oz, one of the communities there. Right. And really the whole evening, and I think all of Yom HaShoah was sort of infused with that concern over the hostages and Gaza and the unfortunate parallels between October 7th and the Holocaust and the situation Israel is finding itself in.
But even though we all understand that we have a country, we have a military, we can defend ourselves, but there is that being caught unaware, that being caught by surprise, October 7th. I watched the official commemorations that came out of Yad Vashem,
yes,
which are broadcast on all the channels live as it happens at 8 o'clock, following the siren. No, there's no siren dafka.
No, right. The siren's the next morning.
Right. Yeah. So that's right. The Holocaust Memorial Day, the siren is just in the morning, and it was a very moving ceremony, and I thought President Herzog spoke beautifully. And I just somehow feel that sitting home, just watching this ceremony along with thousands upon thousands of other Israelis, somehow, in a strange way, it binds me to the rest of the country. But obviously, when you go out and you're actually with real people and having right. these ceremonies that you attended, and my wife went to what's called a ceremony in the salon, where they had a small, this happens throughout the country. A Holocaust survivor goes to someone's living room on that evening and talks about their experience.
Right, that's quite common.
And she attended that, and she was very moved by that. So everybody approaches it in their own way.
Right. It's worth mentioning. I think it's the one day of the year in which Israelis, as a general public, also feel a connection with the diaspora, with the Jewish diaspora, because all other events here, and we're going to talk about some of them in a minute because some are coming up now, even this week, are connected more with internally with Israel as a nation, whereas the Yom HaShoah is really concerned with the Jewish people and with what happened in Europe
And so many
and
Israelis
North Africa.
so many Israelis go to Poland for the
That's
march.
right. That's right.
So there is that connection.
There is that connection. By the way, I also, because I did see afterwards, for example, the references to October 7th and the hostages in the official ceremony, including one of the torch lighters. Making a plea for the hostage releases. Unfortunately, as we speak, again, it's not looking so great in terms of the possibilities of a hostage release, certainly in the coming weeks. Hamas sticking to maximalist demands, a lot of questions about the government and Benjamin Netanyahu, whether they're pursuing the right course in trying to reach a hostage deal. Unfortunately, and that's going to color, as I said, some of the events we're going to that are coming up this week because we have this sort of double barrel, unique to Israel. I think I don't know every country in the world, but unique to Israel that it's what in America we would call Memorial Day, the day, or here Yom Zikaron, Remembrance Day, which is both for soldiers, fallen soldiers over the years since even before the founding of the State of Israel, as long as the victims of terrorism. So that's Yom HaZikaron, which is coming up on Wednesday, begins Tuesday evening, and then you have the siren at night, and then
and in the daytime,
and then that quick transition to Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut, the next day, and I do think again, Elliot, for a second year in a row, both these days, but certainly Yom HaZikaron, Remembrance Day, is going to be just suffused with the feelings that's still with us over the situation of the hostages in Gaza and the soldiers who are falling in Gaza, and unfortunately, that toll is even just been heavy in the last couple of days.
Absolutely, it's a very very difficult thing to mark a country's independence while it's at war. I imagine the United States did it during the Second World War. Obviously, they did it during the Vietnam War. But I just think that the 560 days, I lose track of how many days we're into this war. Having Independence Day and marking it and commemorating it, it's not an easy thing to do for me personally.
Right, and we just, as I mentioned, just in the last few days, we're recording this on a Sunday, and we've seen 4 soldiers fallen in action
in several different incidents. Firefights in the Gaza Strip.
In the Gaza Strip, and figures of 318 fallen over the past year. Very heavy toll for Israel. Even more in terms of people who suffered injuries from prior to that, or bodies that have been discovered since then. I think figure is 61, the official figure there. So this is going to be a very difficult Yom HaZikaron Remembrance Day here for all of us.
Right. So if we sound a little subdued today, it's because we went from Pesach, from Passover, to the Holocaust Memorial Day, and we're heading into the Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers, and then we're going into Independence Day.
Yes, and then straight into Independence Day, and it was a ceremony. We mentioned the torchlighting,
which we'll talk about in a minute. Let me just switch briefly to our history segment and tell you what happened roughly this week or in this period of time. So a couple of very interesting things happened. I won't dwell on most of them. 1492, that goes back before us. It's the 533rd anniversary of the proclamation that Spain issued, telling Jews they had until July to get out or convert to Christianity. That's one commemoration that we mark this week. Another is the birthday on May 2nd of Theodor Herzl.
Okay. So a happier occasion.
A happier occasion.
The expulsion from Spain.
And of course, I what I'd like to do is just give you a sense, just based on going back and reading the Jerusalem Post the Palestine Post
Yes.
of 1948.
It was still called the
It
Palestine
was still called the
Post.
Palestine Post. Let me just
Just quick trivia question. What year did the name change from the
well,
Palestine Post to the Jerusalem Post?
Micronan took a credit for initiating that change. I don't know if it's true or not, if that's apocrypha. What year?
1950. It
1950.
took 2 years.
Big mistake, I would say, from a point of view of public relations. But let me tell you.
Right. Right.
Let's just set the stage. Imagine we were on the fifth day of the Hebrew month of ER, because everything is organized according to the Hebrew month. By the way, and that would have been coincided with May 14, 1948. So that was the day that the Provisional Government of Israel, meeting before Shabbat, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Tel Aviv, declared the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael, to be known as the State of Israel. And they issued this Declaration of Independence, which, among other things, promised that by October 1st, this is May 15th, that by October 1st, 1948, there would be a constitution and Israel would have a constitution. So we don't.
That hasn't turned out to be very significant, has it?
That same day,
I think we've been in a constitutional crisis ever since.
That same day, May 14, 1948, the 5th of ER, that same day, President Truman gave de facto recognition to the State of Israel.
Hugely significant.
Hugely significant. Tel Aviv was bombed that same day.
By the Egyptians.
Egypt and Jordan invaded
Right.
The new State of Israel. The Arab side had rejected General Assembly Resolution 181, which was the partition.
Right.
The partition of the land, and they saw it as patently unfair, and they rejected it out of hand. In response, the Declaration of Independence, so Egypt's army invaded through, talk about things not changing much. They invaded through Rafah,
Yes.
through the Gaza Strip. They invaded through the Gaza Strip. The Jordanians, or what they would call the Transjordan, came obviously and ultimately took over all of the West Bank,
Yeah.
and eventually annexed the West Bank. That same Friday, the Haganah made had various achievements. They captured Akko. And here's what I find interesting: as we all take for granted, those of us who live in Israel and drive the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway. The Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway had some of the most fierce fighting at a place called Bab El Wad, which
Yes.
we know as Shar Hagai,
Right.
the gate of the valley, and which right now is known for simply having a lot of traffic.
Right.
It's I guess it's both sides. It's like 8 lanes of traffic, but in those days, that's where there was a make or break battle.
Yes, because that was the one road to Jerusalem. By the way, a one-lane road then.
One lane.
That was the only way to get food and supplies and arms into Jerusalem to the Jewish community there. So that was a fierce fighting.
And the Haganah took various villages, including Latrun and Ramleh. Iraqi forces, I mean, it's amazing, took the monastery at Latrun.
Yes.
And they held that. And the Palestine Post, and it's kind of interesting, they had already gone to print, obviously, by the time Ben Gurion declared, and the website was down, Calev.
Back in 1948.
In 1948.
The early days of the web.
The website was down. So what happened was that the iconic Palestine Post headline,
State of Israel is born.
came out on May 16th, 1948, a Sunday. And the Palestine Post that day reported and I think I don't know who wrote it, but this one line, it said, between Thursday night and this morning, Palestine went through what by all standards must be among the most crowded hours in its history. That's so true.
An understatement.
An understatement. And all sorts of other things happened. Obviously, the situation was quite was bleak. The electricity failed in most of
sure.
Jerusalem. And as we enter Yom HaZikaron, that's Memorial Day, commemorating the all of the soldiers that Israel lost and civilians that Israel lost. It's sobering to recall that the war between the Zionist enterprise and the Palestinian Arabs began long before that fifth day of Iyar, 5708. That is long before that day, that May 15th, what we call Yom HaAtzmaut, what they call the Nakba. And alas, Calev, it rages on.
It rages on, and again, this is a somber. In some, of course, Israelis are still going to go out. They have to celebrate and appreciate what we have here, but there's definitely going to be, as there were last year, a subdued atmosphere for some. There have been, by the way, on the official, maybe we should talk a little about the official ceremony, which is on Mount Herzl, by the gravesite of Theodor Herzl, who you mentioned. The official ceremony, several political figures have said they're not going to attend this year.
Because of the war,
because of the war, because of the government, and the as we alluded to, their position on terms of the hostage negotiations and how they're conducting them. There are also, as you know, every year we have what we call the torchlighting.
Right.
12 torches are lit representing the 12 tribes of Israel.
Actually, there are many more tribes of Israel than 12 today, but okay.
There are many more, yes.
But okay.
And as always, usually, people are chosen from different spheres of Israeli life. So you have people in the social work or political sphere, or people from culture or sports. In the last couple of years, they even added a torch, especially for the represented Jews of diaspora.
Right.
That's a fairly recent addition.
I didn't realize that, and I wonder. Well,
the fairly recent. I mean, there was a question about whether, as I said before, Yom HaShoah is a day for the Jewish world, for international Jewry. Observed in Israel was Israel Independence Day is a national holiday. So the question was, should it be? Should there be a torch for diaspora Jewry? And so there was some controversy over it this year. Also, some interesting choices for these.
What are the choices?
Well,
I got to tell you, I'm still not 100% sure about this whole idea of diaspora torch, but
well, some of them are I would say the torches. Of course, the hostages are going to be remembered by, and the October 7th, by people who have been held hostage. Emily Damari, of course, it was been I would almost say become a sort of a heroic figure for how she conducted herself there as a hostage. And since Eli Sharabi, they're going to be athletes. Oren Smadjo, the Israeli judoka who lost a son fighting in Gaza Strip, but of course is Israel's Olympic medal-winning judoka. He's going to be lighting a torch. These are a kind of standard. A couple, though, have aroused a little bit of controversy. One of them, interestingly enough, is Dana International. Now, for those who don't know, Dana International.
I know this cultural figure. I know
Dana International. You should, because Dana International is a Israeli singer. She is a transsexual. I think her birth name was Yoram Cohen, and she transitioned to becoming Sharon Cohen. Right. She represented Israel in the Eurovision competition and won. Viva la Diva, and she's represented Israel in different international kind of singing forums and has spoken well. And she was chosen to light one of the torches on the sort of with the cultural side.
Right.
Interesting enough, some performers who were asked refused. Yodena Razi, who was a very I would say sort of consensus type, what we call beautiful Israel, land of Israel song figure. She turned it down. She felt it would not be appropriate this year, given what was happening.
Am I right that Dana International herself turned it down
a year ago?
Right.
And she criticized another singer who had agreed to do it, Ivry Leader. But I think at that time what she said is that feelings were too raw still then. She didn't feel comfortable doing it, but now she does. But the selection of a a transgender that or transsexual, transgender that has gone under reassignment surgery, to sign this has stirred opposition in Israel from conservative and religious quarters. And it's very interesting that this government that chose her, shows you the complexities of Israel. She's not someone, though, I should say, that speaks out politically.
No, on the contrary, she's a good PR influence for the country.
Right. And by the way, she has spoken out, for example, internationally to the LGBT community
On behalf of Israel.
On behalf of Israel, saying, if you were LGBTQ in Gaza, Hamas would kill you, and make that point. So she has, and by the way, doing so, speaking out like this, she of course risks losing some of her fan base internationally. Needless to say.
Of course.
So a deserving choice. I've interviewed her a few times, and she is quite a personality, and I think it is a deserving choice. Another one of the interesting choices, and to some controversial, is what we said, the diaspora torch.
Yeah.
Two figures have been picked.
Okay.
One is a British Jewish lawyer, barrister, I guess you say, Natasha Hausdorff, who has spoken out in favor and defended Israel in many public forums, like, for example, at the Oxford Union, a debate there. And she's spoken out especially on issues. She's an international law expert.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed her when I worked at I-24 News. Mm-hmm. And she's spoken out defending Israel against the charges of those who have tried to, in the ICC or in other legal forums, accuse it of war crimes.
Right.
And that. And I think everyone's, that's an admirable choice. Then Ben Shapiro, who, for those who don't know, is a right-wing, a pretty far right-wing political commentator in the United States.
Orthodox.
He's an Orthodox Jew, which he does speak about. He started something called the Daily Wire, which is a online platform for right-wing and conservative figures. He has spoken out in defense of Israel, and he has been chosen to also light the diaspora torch. A little controversy there because he has, though, for example, been highly critical of other. He's spoken out against Reform Jews, for example, saying that they don't value Jewish identity. He's spoken out very much against transgender individuals, saying they suffer from mental illness and disease. And very ironic, him and Dana International together on the stage, lighting the torches. It speaks somewhat to the complexities of Israel that a lot of its critics miss.
Right. Absolutely. Ben Shapiro, I have a problem with, unlike you, I have a problem with a diaspora torch. I'm not reconciled to that. But when I think about Ben Shapiro, and I think about how his obsession with homosexuality and also with abortion. Now, abortion is not such a big issue here in Israel, but he's strongly anti-abortion.
Right.
And he was asked once. I watched a clip of him. He was asked about whether or not if a child was raped by her father, would he agree under those circumstances that she should that the child could have an abortion? And he said no. And I was thinking, why is that? What do I don't. It's not an issue of mine. I don't care about abortion much. It's not an issue here. But I was thinking about the women soldiers that we have captured or who were affected by the October 7th attack. And one of our fears, of course, was that they were sexually abused, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, if just the whole idea of this dogmatic position, which I don't personally think is in harmony with Jewish values, I just find it very difficult to. And so let me ask you this, Calev. Putting all that aside, who picks these people? Who picked Don International? Who picked
Well,
Ben Shapiro? Who picks all these?
I mean, officially, I don't know.
What minister is in charge of
Miri Regev, the Minister of Transportation, who is herself a bit of a controversial figure in Israel, especially if people are stuck in those traffic jams or in the various train mishaps that happen on the train lines, which she's supposed to be responsible. But for some reason, she's also in charge of official ceremonies. I presume there is a brain trust that does. Look, Ben Shapiro, hugely popular in the States. He does speak out in favor of Israel. But yes, he's a divisive figure, even within the Jewish community.
Right.
If the government wanted to pick people who are speaking out in favor of Israel, there are plenty, including people who hold conservative values.
Of course.
And then there are Natasha Hausdorff, as I said before, Orthodox Jews in the entertainment field, Mayim Bialik, if that name means anything
Of course
to you.
it does.
So you have to question about, if this is the best selection. I'm not saying whether a person is deserving or not, but in an event which one hopes would be about unity,
together.
bringing people together, bringing Israel and the diaspora together, bringing the diaspora itself together. Those are the questions. That's the questions. I think this kind of thing raises.
Absolutely. Well, Calev, we're living this is a historic moment. As you know, we're recording this on Sunday. Yesterday was the funeral of Pope Francis. There are, a change in popes is not something that we all experience a whole lot of times. Now, there are an estimated 3 billion Catholics in the world, and most of them, the countries with most Catholics are in South America, Latin America, the Philippines, and so on. But by the way, and it's not by the way, but there are 200,000 Christians, mostly Arab Christians, who live here in Israel. About half of them are Catholic. So the funeral of a pope, Pope Francis, born in Argentina, of Italian heritage, I believe, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, his funeral matters. And yesterday there were about 130 delegations that went to Rome, 50 heads of state. But interestingly enough, Israel's head of state did not go. Israel's prime minister did not go. Israel's foreign minister did not go. We were represented by our ambassador to the Holy See, Ambassador Yaron Seidman.
Yeah.
Netanyahu tweeted a condolence, and President Herzog issued also a social media message. I think other than the ambassador, as far as I could tell, Rome's chief rabbi attended.
Right.
And also the director of interreligious affairs for the American Jewish Committee, Rabbi Noah Marins attended. Right. Obviously, there may have been others, but on the whole, on a governmental level, from the state of Israel, there was at the ambassadorial level. Now, Calev, I think it's worth talking because this is a once in a very, very often event. I think it's worth explaining why the Catholic Church matters in its relationship with the state of Israel.
Right.
And I just want to cover a couple of basic ideas. For centuries, the Catholic Church taught contempt of Judaism. It was a teaching of contempt. And the Catholic Church reversed this long-standing teaching of contempt in 1965 with a statement called Nostra Aetate, in which the church repudiated the imputation that the Jews were killers of God.
Right. It was a huge development.
It was a huge development. So the relationship is there's a theological element to the relationship, but Israel represents a theological problem for the church because the Catholic Church sees itself theologically as the true Israel, and here we come along.
Right.
Politically, Calev, the Holy See, the Holy See, by the way, is the church in its diplomatic manifestation. The Pope is a political actor, the Vatican's apparatus of government. The Holy See found it extraordinarily challenging to accept the idea of a Jewish national Jewish homeland in Palestine. And finally, so we have the theological, we have the political, and then we have the pragmatic. There are a lot of Christians living in the Muslim world, much less the Arab world.
Yeah.
And the church has a responsibility for their well-being and their safety,
Right.
and an affinity toward them, obviously, and an aesthetic, a shared value. And that is one of the reasons why the relationship is extraordinarily complex. I'll go back a little bit, and then I'd like you to weigh in. But let's go back to 1904.
Okay.
What happened in 1904? In 1904, we just mentioned Theodor Herzl. We mentioned
Right.
that it's his birthday. We mentioned that the Yom Ha'atzmaut ceremonies, the independence ceremonies, are held very close to his burial place.
Yes.
On January 26th, 1904, Theodor Herzl achieves an audience with the Pope.
Right.
And he goes to the Pope, pleads with the Pope to support this idea that Herzl has called political Zionism.
Right.
The Pope says, we cannot be in favor of this. The Pope, of course, was Pope Pius the 10th.
Right.
And realistically...
Who's a very spotty history with the Jews, which we will not go into right now.
That was Pope Pius X.
Yeah.
But realistically, again, how could the Pope support such a thing when political Israel, when the Catholic Church considered itself?
Right.
So we had all of these. So that's part of the complexity, and
Right.
you know, we talked about the Church then reverses its theological or I don't know if reversing is quite the word, but it tries to reverse its position on at least it certainly reverses its position on holding the Jews responsible for the death of Jesus, because that's killing God, that's deicide, and it reverses its position mostly by under the impetus of Pope John the 23rd, who died in 63, and a cardinal, little known cardinal named Cardinal B, who died in 68. But even after their death in 65, under Pope Paul, the declaration that I mentioned, Nostra Aetate, came out on October 28th, 1965, and the Church even acknowledged that it had been perpetuating anti-Semitism. Okay, so we got the theological part, but still, Calev, the theology part, we made a lot of strides in, but the Israel part, the Zionism part, that part is a lot harder for the Church to reconcile itself with. And so that kind of remains a constant, that the support for the Palestinian Arabs is unwavering.
Absolutely.
Support for Israel is almost there's no such thing as support for Israel. So I mean, popes have visited Israel, but I should tell you that in terms of the Palestinian Arabs, in 82, Pope John Paul II received Arafat.
Right.
In 82. Now, in 82, Arafat hadn't made any noises about accepting the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. Never.
Right.
Right? So even then, the Pope, there were the Kurt Waldheim business. Sure. I hate to tell you, Mother Teresa, even Mother Teresa met with Arafat while Arafat was still committed to destroying Israel. Okay, so in 93, we signed the Oslo Accords with the PLO, and that allows the Vatican to recognize the state of Israel, and that's all good. Now, Francis himself, because I want to come back to this idea that we didn't have a delegation, a high-level delegation at his funeral.
I have to say it's even more than that. First of all, a couple of things. By the way, Herzl's idea was not just that there be the founding of a Jewish state, but as absurd as it sounds, he also had the idea that those Jews who decided not to come to the Jewish state, they would convert en masse to Christianity in a special ceremony at the Vatican,
right.
Which sounds kind of absurd.
It sounds kind of absurd today, but the whole idea that Herzl's whole idea is he wanted to solve the Jewish problem.
Right. That's negation of the diaspora.
Negation of the
Pope didn't, even that didn't tempt the Pope then to
No,
support
no, it
Zionism.
didn't. No.
In terms of the, it was even in terms of the government's attitude towards the passing of Pope Francis, even worse because in the wake of his immediate passing, there was condolences put out and a message on social media by all the embassies in the world
right.
of condolences, simply saying, "May his memory." The memory of Pope Francis be a blessing. And shortly after, a message came out from the foreign ministry in Jerusalem telling all the ministries to remove that message, to take it down.
Right.
So even not offering condolences there.
On the foreign ministry level.
On the foreign ministry level.
Right. So let me talk a little bit about Francis, because don't look for consistency about Francis's attitude towards Israel or even towards Jews. In his final address, the final address that was read out on Easter, because he was too weak to read it himself, that address bemoaned what Israel was doing in Gaza.
Right.
The Pope Pope Francis never once denounced Hamas explicitly for October 7th. Never once. On Christmas 2023, his annual Orbi et Orbi address, he called for the release of the Israeli hostages.
He consistently did call for the release of the hostages.
He calls for the release, but again, very quickly, he shifts into telling the IDF that it should stop the war. Francis himself, not much time to talk about his background, but he was a Jesuit.
Right.
As they say, Hamevin Yavin. He was a Jesuit. He had some empathy for Jews. When he was a cardinal, he even wrote. He visited the Buenos Aires AMIA building after it was reconstructed, because that's the building that was bombed by Hezbollah in '94, and he went there to show support. But when it comes to Israel and October 7th, the Pope didn't miss an opportunity to condemn Israel. 3 months into the war, he denounced the tsunami of anti-Semitism. But here's it's very interesting. He even said, this Pope said in 2015, because you got the one step forward, one step back. In 2015, the Pope said, to attack Jews is anti-Semitism. But an outright attack on the state of Israel is also anti-Semitism. That's what the Pope said. The state of Israel has every right to exist in safety and prosperity. That's wonderful. That's what the Pope said. But I think what happened was that the war really wore him down, so that I don't know if many people know this, but virtually every evening of the war, the Pope called the parish in the Gaza Strip personally. He personally called the parish. He personally spoke to Father Gabriele Romanelli at 7 o'clock virtually every evening since October 7th. And this is what the Pope said. They tell me about what happens there. It's very tough, very tough. I listen and they tell me things. There's a lot of suffering.
Right.
Okay. So obviously they didn't tell him that, Hamas had used the church. But now, and then I want to also say that it's worth referencing that in his 2024 Christmas address, the Pope talked about yesterday children were bombed. He talked about the cruelty of Israeli behavior. But again, he also held audiences with the
yes.
So, I mean, we have this back and forth.
It's a mixed look.
I have to tell you, I just want to tell you, even with regard to anti-Semitism, which the Pope clearly denounced, in 2021, Francis gives a homily. And the homily is rooted in Paul's letters to the Galatians. And Francis then summarizes, he starts going off talking about the Torah. And he says, quote, the Torah, the law, which he means the Torah, the law does not give life. It does not offer the fulfillment of the promise because it is not capable of being able to fulfill it. And he goes on, okay, that is Christianity 1.0. Nobody has any, Christians believe what they believe. That's fine. Obviously, he doesn't say anything about, the New Testament. He doesn't say anything like, no, the Quran does not supersede the New Testament, which is what they believe. And he goes out of his way always to separate Islam from Islamic terrorism.
Right.
So that's sort
Right. Look, obviously Pope Francis was a complex figure. Some of the attitudes he had to Jews, to the state of Israel, certainly have to reflect his background as a Jesuit, as growing up in Argentina during the period in which he grew up in, as someone who was, he did come out of what was called the progressive side of the Catholic Church, which is connected with the progressive politics, had all certain attitudes toward Israel and the Palestinians that were all found expression. I certainly wouldn't call him a friend, or not necessarily a friend or a supporter of Israel, but he was a formidable figure within the church.
Absolutely.
And taking, it is reductive, even though we here in Israel, to then look and break down every single thing he said about Israel and the Jews. The comparison would be Nelson Mandela, a hugely important, influential, or Mahatma Gandhi. Both, again,
Let's
figures,
have a program about Mahatma
but my
Gandhi.
point is that they had very in some cases, one would say problematic attitudes or issues with certainly the idea of a Jewish state.
Right.
But I just want to say that we can't. It was a mistake not, I think, to send a higher level delegation. Maybe I understand Prime Minister Netanyahu not going to the Vatican to honor a leader who was so directly critical of him and his government. But President Herzog or some other, I wouldn't expect any of the chief rabbis, the Orthodox chief rabbis, to go. I think it was a mistake not to send a high-level delegation or President Herzog to the Vatican for this.
I'm agnostic about whether it was a mistake or not. I'm looking at a picture of the Pope sitting in his wheelchair on Christmas 2024. He's looking at a nativity scene, the Nativity of Bethlehem.
I know what this is.
And okay, go ahead. And what does it show? That picture? What does that picture show?
It shows
baby Jesus wrapped in a keffiyeh.
Yes.
And the Pope is paying homage. So look, wrapping it up, the Pope has a mixed record for theological, political, and repolitic reasons. There's a limit to how far the Church can or wants to go in accepting the idea of a national Jewish homeland for the Jewish people. But one final thought before we sign off, and that is that Pope Francis elevated Father, later Monsignor, Pier Battista Pizzabella.
Yes. That's
the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem.
Have elevated him to a cardinal.
Right.
And
he started out as a custos.
He is considered a realistic candidate to be chosen as Pope.
Absolutely. And there are some remarks floating around that I want you to know are incorrect about what Pizzabella has said about Israel. He is, as far as I can tell, and as far as a meeting that he personally had with Professor Sergio Della Pergola to discuss his attitudes. There's no question that Father, now Cardinal Pizzabella, is a fascinating and I would hope welcome possibility. Now he speaks Arabic.
Right.
He speaks Hebrew. He speaks English. He speaks Italian. And he's in the running, as you say, for the next Pope. And I'm not going to go to Ladbrokes right now about this because one of the you don't want to. But it would be nice. Maybe it would be nice to have a hometown boy.
Maybe I'll just add. You will be happy to note that a lot of the people who are putting the analysts of the coming conclave, like that recent movie to choose the Pope, have said the one thing against Cardinal Pizzabella that you'll like to hear is that at 60 years old he's too young to be Pope. So he's too young to be Pope. Maybe we're too young to, for people to see us as these kind of elder figures. But anyway, Elliot, I want to wish you, of course, we should observe, and all of our listeners in the Jewish world should observe the Yom HaZikaron Remembrance Day for Israel's heroes and martyrs in its national struggle, and of course for Israel, and have a happy Israel Independence Day. Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.
Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.